Welcome to the Faith and Fear podcast. Our goal is to help illuminate some of the more obscure aspects of the esoteric, to shed light on places that for centuries have been purposely kept in the dark. Join us as we discuss our experiences in this arena and work through the greater mysteries of life together.
And we're back. We are still alive, and we are here. Greg.
Still alive.
Hi. Thanks you for sitting down with me here at the Watchman's table, taking a look back as we endeavor continue to track and trace the steps of hero's journey and as we recall our own on that journey, we can't help but recall how we've come across each other on that journey. I know, as I referenced in the past, you, Greg, and Ryan have an interesting backstory there. Would you care to share that?
Yeah. How old were you, Greg, when we met?
I'm pretty sure I was 13.
Okay, yeah, I'm a couple years older. So Greg's family married into our family. So his mom married my uncle. So we got some bonus cousins out of the mix. And I don't know. We lived in the same state, but not the same city. So I don't know if I
Right.
met you before like the wedding rehearsal.
No, I don't think so either. And I was pretty quiet back then. I was probably keeping to myself.
Yeah, so we were at this church for a wedding rehearsal, and there's a million cousins. So all the cousins were kind of hanging out in one of the back rooms, just being kids. And Greg was kind of in the corner drawing, right? You were drawing Dragon Ball Z characters?
Right.
Yeah. And I was, I'm still a big anime nerd. Like, I was all about Dragon Ball Z at the time. That was like the Toonami era Dragon Ball Z
Right, yeah.
stuff in America, and so I was like, all right, I'm gonna talk to this guy because he likes the things that I like. That sounds neat. So then we just wouldn't leave him alone. Me and my sister decided that he was gonna be our friend, whether he liked it or not.
Yeah. But definitely got me out of my shell more than anybody else.
Yeah, we hung out off and on through the years, and at some point, I think I was closer to 18 or 19 at the time. I think we were hanging out, and he mentioned he was working on a story, like writing a story, or I mentioned it. I don't know who talked about it first, but we were both working on writing these fantasy stories separately without each other's knowledge in different cities. And we kind of talked, I explained a little bit about mine, or he explained a little bit about his, and there was a lot of similarities and a lot of overlap. We're like, well, this is super weird. It's like we're writing the two sides of one story. It was really interesting. So we decided to try to work together, kind of fuse our stories and make one big giant 20 years down the road. We haven't really done it. Saga.
Right. Dang
The
it.
story continues, doesn't it?
Yes. But the one thing that were common threads through both stories were the terms faith and fear, and kind of what that in our stories they were kind of elements, but kind of what that means in life.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember we had like spiritual characters, kind of like angels and demons, but we called them keepers and shadows. And they were like these beings of faith and fear
Right.
that talk to people and either help them or ruin their lives.
Yeah. Not a lot of gray area there.
No, that's where the faith and fear philosophy started.
Yep.
Uh,
We were just kids.
Whoa. And yet still keyed in to a similar mythic spiritual frequency. It's far
Yeah.
out, man.
It was pretty neat.
yeah, it was kind of unreal getting into that stuff. But yeah, I guess it was probably almost exactly about 10 years later I met you, Michael, on Job
Mhm.
Corps. I don't remember how that started. Do you remember? Because I thought you like hated me when I first got there.
Oh, he
Um,
still does.
Oh yeah, that
the,
makes sense.
the hatred is most sincerely an intimidation and a jealousy. Oh shit, this guy is actually fit. He can actually play the guitar. He can. Oh shit.
Man.
Um, so yeah, I think that's how that's what most hatred is disguising. And we were both in forestry, and before you had arrived, I was like I was the top dog, and then all of a sudden, shit, the real alpha has arrived.
And,
So what happens
goodness.
anytime Greg pulls out the guitar. I just try to put mine away quietly.
Oh crap.
And you were less humble then, but you were still very humble, and so it was definitely a trip to get to know you in those layers that I did, from your skill with the guitar to your skill with different kinds of exercises, both physical and mental. And I was very interested because I was at the time trying to practice lucid dreaming, and you had these exercises you were practicing and suggesting very much rhymed with the exercises I picked up looking toward lucid dreaming and these other realms. And the more we spoke and talked, the more I heard about your dreams, which is a whole other rabbit hole, and more about your stories, the story you just mentioned, and the archetypal elements of these stories, these keepers and these shadows. And we got to share these stories around the campfire in the wilderness. Like we were situated where we got to meet was in the old growth forests of the Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon. It's quite a place to tell those stories.
Yeah.
Um, and then while you were able to give me those sobering stories, I was carrying the stories of Alan Watts, to name the standout story.
Okay.
And you were
Yeah, that changed me forever.
like to my credit, I was listening to Alan Watts before it was cool. Before
Oh
there
yeah.
were
Definitely before it was cool.
Nice.
definitely. So you had a front row seat there with me, my friend. And credit does go to my big
How did
brother.
even start up?
Huh?
Yeah, that's really
Uh-huh.
yeah, I got in there at the start of this whole transformation, it seems, even all of society's going through even. But what was I gonna say? Oh, yeah. Alan Watts. That was like the first time because the story that me and Ryan were working on, I put so much time in trying to make the backstory. So I wanted to understand like spirituality thoroughly, so I knew how to like draw up these characters, like how they would behave, what the whole elements of everything was. So all of my own philosophy just kind of was all about building this book. I wasn't like a philosopher at the time, but when you introduced me to Alan Watts and I was hearing all the thoughts he was having, it was just like all the stuff I was trying to get into, and he like had a much further level of mastery than I did in all these things and really revealed a lot to me. So yeah, that got me started on getting into actual philosophy and listening to lectures and stuff. And yeah, the terms faith and fear really transformed from there.
And And I was very grateful for how grateful you were, because I tried to share it with a number of friends to that point, and it was lukewarm response at best.
Not a lot of 20-year-olds are super excited about Alan Watts.
I didn't know. I didn't understand why. I was like, "Do you guys hear this? Do you guys hear what he's saying?"
Listen to what he's saying, though.
It was amazing. It was such a breath of fresh air for me. Very invigorating and sobering. And I was also grateful because you helped kind of ground all of this heady stuff I was consuming at that point. I was very much in the clouds with so many ideas. And I was trying to get my feet on the ground and learn nature and how to be there. And fortunately, I came across you and your experience and your relationship with nature, and you helped me look closer and more broadly at that world. And during the course of getting to know nature better with your assistance, faith, a certain kind of faith, really came online for me. Seeing the perfection of creations. Wow. Wow. All of the philosophies really started to land in what I was seeing out there in those woods. So I continue to be grateful for that growth I found with you then.
Oh,
And
man. Appreciate it.
The appreciation continues to be appreciated.
Awesome.
The value continues to be added onto our stock is growing, sir. But to this point, the faith part, we are hoping to look at faith closer. But first, I understand there is some recapping to do here of faith and fear. Would you take it away, please?
Yeah. So before we get all into faith, just wanted to recap on faith and fear as terms and concepts that we're going to be using a lot in the podcast in general. So what we mean by faith and fear, we're using capital letters for these terms. They're referring to your level of spirit, your spirit level. They refer to like the polar ends of like a spectrum of your spirit. So say somebody says that person has high spirits. That's basically what we're referring to, but that's someone with high spirits is someone who's more in a faith condition, and somebody who's in low spirits is in a fear condition. So that's the scale we're referring to. And faith refers to a growth in spirit, and fear refers to a decay. Now, the whole spectrum itself is like your spirit in general, but probably get into that later. One last note on fear. Fear enters our lives when we experience something we process as chaos, confusion, or unknown. There's an inherent instinct to respond to these things with fear, but this is an animal side of our experience, where as humans, we have the ability to both master fear and profoundly intensify it. And that's why it's important to understand this concept and how faith can help you do that. Help to master it anyway.
So either to master or intensify the fear. And so before we bring faith into the picture as a counterbalance, if you will, I'm curious about how you're describing fear as an element of decay. And I am seeing like not so much death, but a dying process, this degeneration. Are you seeing faith? Excuse me. Are you seeing fear as a part of death and the dying process?
Well, yeah. Yeah, we'd have to probably get into more aspects of fear for that to make sense. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say about it. And yeah, as we go further into the podcast, it's probably going to be, and if we are able to come up with more examples, like a lot of these little, I don't know, holes maybe in the explanation
Sure.
filled. But yeah, it's a spiritual decay,
Mm.
and spiritual decay can affect the body and the mind very quickly and profoundly. So
Mm.
it can cause death.
Mm.
As far as dying of old age, we'd have to really get into the weeds of the philosophy of fear to understand how that applies. But yeah, in general, it's a lowering of your spirit, which also lowers your immune system in both your body and your mind. So you become more vulnerable with fear, and life starts to consume you.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of medical studies that show that just having hope can increase the odds of um, surviving some kind of a traumatic event or a cancer or something.
Yeah.
And when there's a hopelessness, uh, then the kind of will to survive or to make it through, it just isn't there, and that can definitely affect the whole body.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
that's a
is,
good way to put it too. The will to live. I guess it's another way of referring to these terms. Like faith is a stronger or strengthening will to live, and fear is the opposite.
now I'm also wondering if, from a scientific point of view, without getting into an emotional prognosis of hopelessness or depression or a lack of will to live, would it be accurate to also describe fear as this stress, the stress of the burden of the decay, the burden of all of the different stories, just the burden of the fear, that stress. And
Mhm.
so, like hopelessness being this chronic taxation of the system to where it's not getting its rest, not being able to hold itself well.
Right.
Would fear also then, from one angle, could be described as a stress that is degenerative?
Well, I guess what we're trying to get to with the term is where things like stress and negative emotions come from.
Uh-huh.
So, anxiety's under the umbrella of fear, and a big part of it that's even deeper than your emotions.
Right.
But yeah, so that would be another way of referring to fear is I mean, stress and trauma and stuff, those terms are thrown around a lot. But yeah, that's really what we're talking about when it comes to the effect that fear has on you. It's form of stress or anxiety.
Okay. That makes sense. I I'm wondering if there's anything more you'd like to say about the recap here of faith and fear before moving on to focusing on faith.
Nope, it was mainly just to like open the door with what fear is and why it's important to understand it,
Right.
because it's a part of our everyday lives, and if we don't understand it, it can affect us in very negative ways.
Right.
And that's where faith is a very powerful tool.
Indeed. Now, as we approach faith, um, it seems to me that fear has been much easier to account for because it seems so much more natural and so familiar these days, but also because
Mhm.
you can be afraid of the most mundane of things. There can be
Sure.
the fear. And yet, the general story of faith is about something much greater and something much more beyond the mundane.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more potential behind the concept of faith than there is of fear.
So I'm very curious, your understanding of faith that is able to simplify, I suppose, or cut through even some of the stories that come up when the word faith is spoken. You know, all the different religions to, you know, and all the different judgments about those who are experiencing or practicing faith from a scientific perspective. So,
Yeah.
please,
Well, I guess I'm trying to use it as just the general term that it is rather than connect it with any kind of religious belief.
okay. So, to start at the fundamentals,
Mhm.
please go ahead.
Okay. So the first thing that I think should be said is faith doesn't directly resolve the pains of life or those resulting from fear. But what it does do is reveal the way to the resolution of that fear. And so it doesn't change your circumstances, but it changes your ability to handle them and the potential outcomes you can be the cause of.
A
So,
question. Quick
yes.
question. I'm reminded of that quote from Karl Marx when he described religion as the opiate for the masses. And the picture in that case, is that religion, the vessel for a certain kind of faith, is just a numbing agent to calm down the many fears and pains of life. From the most negative perspective, I've heard people try to spin that positively to suggest that sometimes we need a painkiller because sometimes pain is way too much. There are things we have to keep moving forward with. But what I'm hearing you say is that it's more than just a numbing agent, more than just a painkiller. This is about the fundamental of faith is a more profound reframe. Am I getting to the point there?
Yeah, so faith is your ability to find the power within yourself to overcome your own challenges or even just navigate any kind of ordinary situation. So faith is like I said, you're a raised level of spirit. You have a lot of energy to work with. You're more healthy. Your mind's working better. And when you're in a state of fear, yeah, it's not going to relieve pain, but that's not the purpose. Faith is meant to help guide you to your higher self and overcome your situations with that godlike potential within us all, I guess. We're all projections of, everything. We're all part of the universe. We all have the same power to overcome these forces. And faith, what I'm referring to there is kind of like a patience for things. Almost feel like patience is one of the more powerful virtues. Because when you're in a place of fear, your immediate instinct is to panic and try to handle everything as fast as you can. You stagger a lot. You're not thinking things through, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But to find that faith again, you have to stop for a second and realize what you're doing. What is fear doing to you? Are these actions you're taking right now what you actually want to do, or are you being driven by something else? And yeah, fear can just push you forward past your own ability to plan things out, like you're acting before you think kind of thing. And to have the ability to stop yourself in the middle of that happening. It's definitely better to catch it early. But
indeed,
to calm
and
yourself
the risk to risk a further tangent on the tangent, I'm remembering a quote from you when I was first getting to know you, that quote, faith is ability, unquote.
All right. Yeah. And I guess that still holds true in my mind.
Hmm.
Because fear also, when you're in a state of fear, it's easy to think that there is no way out, that the forces are bigger than me, I can't do anything about this kind of thing. But that's never true. There's
Indeed.
always potential. There's always a way. Everything changes, and all you got to do is start stepping in the direction you want to, and the world will change around you.
Amen. I'd like to place a bookmark here for the concept of bad faith, but I want to encourage you to continue with your original explanation of the fundamentals of faith.
Well, well, this might address your question about bad faith a little bit, but faith is not a devotion to a belief. It's a state of being that's earned with virtuous action and pursuit of wisdom. So this isn't a fake it till you make it kind of thing. What I'm talking about is actually reaching into yourself and drawing out that power, drawing out that courage and strength and wisdom. I mean, even joy and peace can be brought out of yourself in the most chaotic of times. And I'm saying, I guess, that faith is that action of trusting yourself, knowing that you are capable of taking on whatever you're dealing with. You're the perfect person, in fact, to deal with everything you're dealing with. And faith in yourself to be able to do that is what just overwhelms fear. So you can rise out of anything depending on your faith in yourself.
It's an interesting word choice you have there of faith overwhelming fear. But yes, this very much is to the point of bad faith. And perhaps this is a good opportunity to explain what I understand about bad faith. As the French philosopher, please pardon my butchery of French, Jean-Paul Sartre, described bad faith as essentially a belief in one's fixedness, and apparently either in one of two extreme ways. Either one is fixed and has a bad faith in one's quote unquote facticity, I believe, where one feels they are fixed in their circumstances and in their position. His example that's often referenced is the waiter in bad faith will wholly become the waiter. And that's all they are, that's all they ever will be. That's it. Because, this is my lot in life. It's almost it's a thing of fate. It's this surrender to fate. And it tastes to me like victimization, to a victim mindset. And then on the other hand, there is a fixedness or a bad faith in one's transcendence, that my circumstances and role and lot in life here don't matter at all. And it's described as something of a disassociation from even the body. Like, I am all something else. I am pure spirit. I think we see this a lot in what's called spiritual bypassing, I suppose.
Yeah.
And in both cases, I'm seeing a grievous rejection or denial of a fuller reality. And it seems out of a fear. There's a fear about one's circumstances or a fear of one's freedom, because, if I'm going to be fixed in my facticity as a waiter, it's very scary. It's too scary, overwhelmingly scary to consider the great grand freedom I have to do anything else. It's much easier to have no choice in that situation, to just keep doing the same old thing. And then it's also much easier for a spiritual bypasser to not give any labels, to reject the fear of one's circumstances by just being high all the time and pretending like my circumstances don't matter. So that is my brief understanding of bad faith, is essentially this feeling like there's not a choice. There's not the ability to choose, or there's not a need to choose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fear is also anything that inhibits you from growing. And when you fixate on stuff like that, that is an act of fear, because you're not growing. You're not allowing things in. You're not letting things flow through your life like they're supposed to. You're trying to control everything. You're trying to keep everything away from you and manipulate it from afar. But that's never going to work, because we're all a part of life and you can't get away from it. So any kind of fixation like that is only it's a fear state, and it's going to cause damage to your life, because life's constantly changing. And when you fixate on things, you're not changing with life. You got to be able to do that. And that's why good faith is not, I talked about it having to be earned. Faith is exercise. It's hard. It's really hard to have courage against something that is overwhelming and frightening and confusing. It's really hard to stand up to it and have that faith in yourself to take it one step at a time and deal with it. So it's an exercise, and any kind of shortcut you might find, like that fixation kind of thing, is only going to end in damage. We got to move with life.
This is shedding some interesting light on biblical interpretations of faith. In the Christian world, there's been a long and ongoing debate about faith over works, or work over faith, and vice versa. And so while the debate rages on about, if we just confess Jesus with great faith and that's it, end of story, we're done, wipe our hands clean and continue on sinning, or doing our best not to, or do we somehow earn our salvation, despite whatever kind of faith or belief we do or do not have? And I guess I'm hearing you describe something of a middle path here, where the exercise of this fundamental faith is a part of a work and an earning for a saving grace, for a saving faith.
Yeah. And I actually say that the idea that you just have to accept Jesus into your life and that's it, that came from one person. I'm pretty sure it just came from Paul. And the rest of Jesus's story, if you listen to what Jesus said, that's not what he was saying at all. No. He was telling you to know yourself, learn all this stuff. You need to be responsible for yourself. And that's how you find the power in yourself that you're looking for. Is be faithful, do the work. It's the great work.
James 2, 18 through 20 says, "But someone will say, 'You have faith, and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that there is one God. You do well. Even demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead?'" So you can't have one without the other. Or you can, but it's not beneficial to anybody.
Right.
as Greg's saying here, is probably just going to do damage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Balance.
Well,
Thank you for the
Yeah.
scripture. Mhm.
yeah, that's awesome. That's a great one. But aside from facing fear, or like a tool to face fear, faith is also a means of finding wisdom for that reason. So fear is also what prevents you from wanting to grow your mind, grow your experience, grow your body. And wisdom comes from the self-aware action of experiencing life, where you're actually paying attention to what's happening and absorbing the wisdom from life. And it's really hard to do that if you are in a state of fear, because to gain wisdom, you have to go outside of yourself. You have to do something you've never done before. You have to make mistakes you never have before. And you have to reach out. So if you're in a state of fear, you're probably not gaining wisdom. And yeah, I guess the point is, in a state of faith, you are more able to take in wisdom and grow faster and find more and more of your potential. So, but it requires that self-awareness and honesty. Like I said, faith is hard to do, or hard to walk with, I guess, because there's a lot of side paths that come up. There's a lot of tempting things. But as you go down this path with faith and gain this wisdom, you start to get to know better what is bringing you joy and fulfillment and peace in life and what isn't. And how to navigate your path is stick to the things that give you joy and peace, and you'll find your inner potential that way. But if you don't do that, your inner potential, your higher self, is going to stagnate, and you're going to disconnect from it more. Your body and your mind are going to be less in your control.
It's the symptoms of a denial, rejection, and disassociation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. However the wall was built, there's a wall between you and the whole process of creation and nature.
Ooh,
And that's what fear does to you.
Hi. So, you make the state and process of faith very appealing here, by contrast. And as we try to, as we return to the table here from that beautiful flyby of faith, and we are coming back down to the ground and remembering this world that we're in now and all the people that we know in it. I'm curious, Greg, if I can challenge you on the spot here to consider any action items one might consider for themselves to begin practicing some active, enabling faith.
Practice patience.
Oh, that's right. Any recipe? How do I give me everything? How do I do it?
Just keep watching. Just pay attention. And whenever fear comes up, have patience. Instead of acting on it, wait. Give yourself a second. Go back into yourself and see if you can deal with it instead of just diving in. But that is how you start. That's why at like monk temples, the training is a lot of sitting and staring into nature. Wait. Learn how to wait and be still.
Indeed. That's the mythology of the initiate in so many circumstances is you need to be bored for a while. You may not, because you're not ready yet to do the miracles, to do the magic. So please wait for a while outside the temple.
Well, about the initiate concept and patience being a part of it, it is a very big part of it. That's a very big part of the spiritual discipline in general. It's not just something the master makes you do just for an exercise. It actually tunes your mind. You have to get to that level of attunement before you can even begin the training, kind of thing. So being patient, having the ability to sit still and just watch and listen, learn. That's something you have to find on your own. You can't go to a class and learn that and follow somebody's instruction. You have to actually go out on your own. I mean, you can do this while you're just going through life, but you're not involving anybody else's input in this. You're just taking in life and trying to see where are the important things in it. What's actually happening? You want to understand it more. You want to bond with it more. And all that takes is just be still, quiet, calm, and you'll see it eventually. But yeah, that's a very important part of the initiation.
Indeed. For any other Jesus nerds in the room with us, it's worth noting that Jesus says watch 24 times, apparently, in the Bible.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a fact, according to Google.
Oh, Google.
I was trying to find a particular scripture which I've enjoyed in the past, and then just found that fun fact.
Well,
but
I guess as we're approaching the end of this, maybe it might be coming time to introduce the idea of the watchman.
I think it's worthwhile because it's very much in this story of the watching, which, as I understand, is connected to the word wait, and vice versa. And then patience itself, the root of the word being this quality of being willing to bear adversities, calm endurance of misfortune and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, there is definitely a need now more than ever, on and on, to be still and watch. So I know you and Ryan here do have some Genesis story of your own for the Watchmen. This can be some bonus material here, but I'm very interested to hear that original story.
Oh, well. Ryan, did you want to talk about what
I think was the Watchman surname? I think that was your creation originally.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the surname of the main character in the story, so we kind of adopted that as tags growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. I mean, where it actually came from, I didn't realize until I was like 12 or 13, I think, that my name means watchman or the watchful one or something like that. But strange as I was as a kid, I, for some reason, just really bonded with that term. It made a lot of sense to me that would be like a position for me in the world, as to be the watchman, the one who watches and makes sure everything's balanced, kind of thing. So the term for me transformed a lot over my life and really started becoming important to me. And the way to define it, and I guess to me, the watchman is someone who's devoted to stepping outside of just the conflict of life in general, trying to be the one up in the tower watching everything, making sure all the reports are being filed properly and you're keeping track of everything, because most people are not. It's not bad that they're not. That's just the nature of most people. But the watchman to me is like a role of just I don't know, probably a small group of people who feels impassioned by the same term.
I wonder if a Game of Thrones nerd could visualize a crow, someone on the wall, all along the watch there.
Yeah, I do really like the concept in Game of Thrones there. The watchers on the wall, because it's a form of service, and it's kind of a thankless one too, because you can't just go around saying I'm a watchman and feel like anybody's gonna give you any credit for that. So
Such an act of service that no one's really volunteering for it.
yeah, and so it's really just a self devotion, like it's your own promise to yourself, like I'm going to serve this role of trying to keep watch on everything's going on. And another aspect of keeping watch is watching out for the monsters, the dark sides of life. Where might they come from? How do you deal with it? How do you set up your own defenses? So
yeah, and this kind of brings me to my original understanding of this Watchmen story as you were telling it to me in the past, in terms of the campfire we were sharing, and the campfire that would be at the center of the village, and the watchman being the one who was willing to be outside the light and the warmth of the fire and the village, and to stand watch in the dark. And that's a beautiful archetype that we see in the Game of Thrones crow. We see on the border patrol. We see in so many different people in law enforcement, and people who are willing to forego a comfort and a security for the sake of other people's comfort and security. And as I'm saying this, I'm curious how this. I'm seeing how it risks becoming something of a martyr. I'm curious, Greg, how you've been able to not allow that in your own case. I'm just going to suffer my own well-being for the sake of others' well-being.
Well, I suppose a martyr, wouldn't they be like trying to prove something by dying? Like, I'm so devoted to this, I'll die, but I'll die for it.
Well, yeah, generally that's the shadow I see in so much workaholism as an easy example, that I'm going to suffer because that's how I prove that I'm a good person. How else do I prove that I'm good?
If we go back to the Watchers on the Wall, Game of Thrones deal, they were definitely martyrs. Like the guys that were there, they knew that they were probably going to die, right? Like, but they did that anyway.
Yeah, I guess I'm just struggling with the term martyr, because it feels like that has something to prove when they didn't really have anything to prove. That was just their role, their fate kind of thing. And it's not, yeah, it's definitely not like a devotion to the death. I mean, being a watchman just implies that you're trying to pay attention and master the fears of death, the causes of death, the joys and wonders of life. You're trying to pay attention to everything, so you're not dying for a useless purpose.
That's beautiful. And I've just looked up the etymology of martyr, and buckle up, brothers. This is beautiful. Apparently, it is literally a translation of witness. And the original sense was one who bears testimony to faith.
My goodness.
The Latin, that's the original Latin, martyr.
Well, dang it.
So I guess we got to take the word back. Time for a
I think it's closely associated with death because a lot of martyrs proved their faith by not, like, I'm going to burn you at the stake unless you denounce God type of a deal.
Yeah, and they chose to witness anyhow, right?
Right.
Well, I'm on board with that. That makes sense to me.
You get the martyr stamp. Good job.
Yeah.
And also to fact check, your name, Greg, is apparently of Greek origin and means something like watchful and vigilant, and was a favorite among Christianity for the connotation of being watchful over at the flock.
Real-time fact checking.
You're welcome.
Excellent.
Doing double duty here. But yeah,
Yep.
Greg, you're working with some really ancient and hefty archetypal roles here, man.
You know what's even crazier is what my last name means.
Quite honest.
My first name means watchman, but my last name means like sacred knowledge. So I'm like the watchman of sacred knowledge or whatever, according to my name.
Whatever. Humility. I think that was being mentioned in the martyrdom even too. So yes, the watchman. Oh, patience isn't humilities and patience. Yes. In suffering or enduring, and not giving into an indulgence, leniency, and practicing that humility. So yeah, you're bringing great patience to your martyrdom, Greg, and I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you.
So yes, this is why we are sitting at the watchman's table. There is much to watch, and there's now so much vying for our attention, our watching attention. Binge watching has now become a common and acceptable word in our modern dictionary. It's just a normal thing now. Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah, and it's people aren't even watching full movies anymore. It's all clips on TikTok and
the chipping away at patience is the chipping away at the will to watch for any extended period of time.
Yeah, hopefully talking about these things helps that come back to life a little bit more in the world.
Indeed.
Patience.
We have much to watch, and now we prepare to go back to our watchtowers. So thank you for sitting with us all here at this table.
Absolutely. This is an honor and a privilege. Really happy to be here. Well, yeah, now the real work begins. We got our terms defined, got our toolkit, and we're going to get into some stuff. But I guess we got to pick what we're going to talk about first.
Stay tuned, folks.
Yeah, it's going to be a mystery.
4, right? That'll be episode 4. This is episode 3.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. Moving along.
Thank you for the honor and for the privilege, Greg. Likewise, Ryan. And thank you, Greg, for bringing us together into this process.
Yeah,
onward,
it's awesome to have us all together.
Onward and upward and support. Right on.
Okay.
And don't forget, folks, keep watching.
Keep watching.